trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a number of, a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, we died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee of Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not a thing. The Russian bots started taking out. Really? Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
Not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because of the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence, a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean...
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3. Citizens of the internet, welcome to another exciting episode of the Politics Show. This is episode number 79. I'm getting up there a little bit.
Oh, I am so glad you are here.
I decided to mess with the headphones again a little bit. I think the headphones kind of help me focus a little better, and I can really hear what's going on. So don't freak out about the headphones. But it's been a big week. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about with the results of the election, which I think a lot of people were kind of on edge about. I'm definitely glad that it's over. But I just want to start by playing this little, in memoriam piece I put together.
I tried so hard and got so far.
Now, I wanted to put the rest of the chorus in there. In the end, it doesn't even matter, but I also don't want to get a copyright strike, and so I used it very short. Let's just see that one more time.
I tried so hard and got so far.
So, there is a lot to address this week, but I want to start with kind of the general theme behind this episode, which is the Day of Reckoning. And if you don't know what a Day of Reckoning is, it's a day where you have to grapple with something that has kind of been there beneath the surface for a long time. And I don't think there's any more appropriate way to summarize the election that just happened. It was definitely a day of reckoning. And why do I say that? Well, I say that because the Democrats have been terrible for a very long time. Since the Obama years, to be honest. And so I want to kind of explain a little bit about my political trajectory, just to kind of, if you know me, if you follow me on Twitter, if you interact with me, you probably know most of this already. But I figured this would be a good time to kind of discuss it as I'm preparing my morning sacrament here. So I got into politics during the Iraq War era. Now, I didn't vote in the election that George Bush won against Al Gore, but I was definitely politically aware at that time. I think I was in my early 20s in the early 2000s. So when that happened, I didn't really think much of Bush being elected. And there was, of course, much ado about that election because of the results and because it kind of looked like it was stolen from Al Gore, who I don't honestly know would have been much better than George W. Bush. But at the time, there's this whole thing about hanging chads, and George Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, happened to be the governor of the state of Florida, where the results were contested. There's a whole side story about a woman named Katherine Harris, who was kind of a Republican operative at the time. And so that was kind of like my first, I guess, peripheral, learning of the American electoral political system. So, of course, Bush was terrible. There were Iraq War protests in 2004, and then they ran John Kerry. And Kerry was, I remember in that primary cycle, Kerry was probably the worst of the candidates. There was John Edwards was in there. There was a couple other decent candidates at that time, but Kerry eventually ended up winning. Let me actually look at that 2004 Democrat primary. So I just want to see. Okay, so it was John Kerry, but Howard Dean and Wesley Clark. So the four main candidates in the 2004 primary were John Kerry, John Edwards, Howard Dean, and Wesley Clark. Howard Dean, of course, being one of the first people to capitalize on the internet. If you remember this at all, Dean actually did really well, and of course, being from Vermont, with the internet crowd back in the day, he was one of the first political candidates to really focus a lot on internet game and fundraising online. And as a result of that, he did really well in the beginning. But then if you remember what happened to him, and this is one of the reasons I'm doing this little retrospective right now, Dean was kind of like pulled out by the media. Well, not pulled out, but he was ruined by the media. This is a way sidebar, but this is what they did to Howard Dean. Some of you may or may not remember this, but Howard Dean won some primaries. And here's the thing. The reason Howard Dean was unliked by the Democratic establishment is because he was progressive. He was actually trying to change healthcare. He had in his platform, he had a bunch of progressive line items. In his platform, he had a bunch of progressive line items that the establishment didn't like. So then he started winning primaries, and this is what happened. This was the moment that ruined the Dean campaign right here. Watch this.
You know something? If you had told us 1 year ago that we were going to come in third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. We're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
So that right there, that little scream.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
That scream, imagine this, that little scream completely tanked his entire campaign just because he went, ah! And Howard Stern was making fun of it. Everyone in the establishment press was making fun of Howard Dean. And that literally, I mean, the title of that YouTube video is "The Scream That Ruined Dean's Campaign." So that's how little it used to take for establishment forces to just take you out of the race. Dean did that awkward scream, and then the talking heads in the corporate press just kind of kept talking. Oh, look, that's crazy. He's crazy. He's way too crazy for us. And that was what ruined his campaign in 2004. So the Democrats nominate John Kerry, who's an absolute terrible nominee. He loses to Bush. You get another 4 years of Bush. There's all kinds of rumors that, because Bush and Kerry went to Yale together and they were part of the Skull and Bones. And that whole Kerry era actually is where one of my favorite sound drops comes from, which I'm going to play right now.
Don't tase me, bro! Don't tase me! I didn't do anything! Ow! 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 Ow!
So that guy was tased for asking questions about Kerry. The setup to that tasing is the guy's asking Kerry about being in the Skull and Bones, and then he won't sit down. And so they just send some guards over and start tasing him. So that was 2004. Then you move into 2008, and I think you all know what happened there. We had the contentious primary between Hillary Clinton and Obama. So that's where kind of the genesis of the Trump thing begins, because Hillary ended up losing to Obama largely because of the Iraq War. If you remember, she supported the Iraq War and Obama did not. But the same kind of establishment forces, the Rahm Emanuels of the world, lined up behind, the Chicago political elite lined up behind Obama, and eventually Obama took the nomination. Now, that campaign was the genesis of the birther thing. Obama's a secret Muslim. The Clinton campaign circulated that picture of Obama at a madrasa in the Democratic primary. Trump went on to use that. Hillary lost that campaign, and we got Barack Obama, a change we can believe in. As soon as Obama came in, as soon as he was elected, he started hedging. So at the time, the healthcare debate was very active, and it was Joe Lieberman, the centrist Democrat, who tanked the public option and made sure there was no Medicare for all at that time. Obama's president for, from 2008 to 2012, and, I voted for him. During that time, I just see none of the things that Obama promised come to fruition. No, Obamacare was kind of like a middle of the road Republican policy that Mitt Romney ran, and was largely supported by, I think it was Bob Dole that came up with it. So when we get into 2012, and forgive me if this is a little bit tedious, I'm just trying to give you my political trajectory here before we jump into the liberal meltdowns post 2024 election. But 2012 was when, I almost said 2012. 2012 was when I went, okay, the Democrats are screwed. Obama's president. Nothing's changing. In fact, they're amping up the wars. And that year, in 2012, I registered in the Republican primary so I could vote for Ron Paul. Now, at that time, Ron Paul kind of took Howard Dean's internet fundraising playbook and made it even better. And if you were part of the Ron Paul campaign, you may or may not remember this, but what the Ron Paul campaign did was kind of perfect grassroots organizing on the internet. And the way that they did that is, as the fundraising deadlines for the political campaigns would come up, they would do what was called a money bomb. So everyone, they would do these vast like fundraising efforts, and tons of people would donate like $5-10 to Ron Paul right before the filing deadline. And Ron Paul would get this huge fundraising haul. And so then the mainstream media who hated him had to report, oh, wow, Ron Paul was like the #1 fundraiser this cycle. And just retracing these steps, you can see what a heavy hand the media has in who the president is or who the nominee is. These people have long set the parameters of the debate. So 2012 happens, Ron Paul gets called a racist. He's immediately pushed out, loses the Republican primary. They end up going with, was it Romney? And, Romney loses to, I'm not going to vote for Romney. So I end up voting for Obama again. So then 2016 comes around and Bernie Sanders enters. So Bernie Sanders takes Ron Paul's, kind of the groundwork or the foundation for online fundraising that Ron Paul and Howard Dean have laid, and he takes it to a whole other level, to the point where he's doing a lot of the same stuff Ron Paul was doing. He's having these huge fundraising hauls, and he's getting into the press. So, we all know what happened from there. As Bernie kind of got bigger and bigger, eventually, the Hillary people started calling us misogynists and all that stuff. And the media kind of forged the narrative around Hillary, and Hillary went on to lose to Donald Trump. Now, there were a lot of valid arguments that Bernie would have beat Trump, because a lot of the independent voters that he was bringing to the table ended up leaving and voting for Trump. So Trump gets elected, another 4 years, and we have the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. Now, this is when things got real serious, and they start censoring social media. And this is the point when I became angry, very angry. Because, I was already angry in 2016 when they made Bernie sit down and put Hillary, and then she lost. So I was already like, fuck you, Democrats, at that point. But this time, and if you're a part of the Bernie movement in 2020, you probably remember this, but the Democrats were just such cunts. They were vindictive, mean, hateful, just like, how dare you progressives try to get a populist candidate in the mix? And they shut Twitter down. I got kicked off Twitter for laughing at Chris Matthews. A bunch of people, we were all censored during that era. And of course, they were able to push Biden through, so they say. And here we are today, with the Democrats. The buildup to this election was insane. And just because of, how hateful the Democrats were in the 2020s and how they kind of haven't delivered anything at all in the last 4 years, I was ready to vote for Trump. I didn't vote, to be completely honest, this cycle. I kind of sat it out. But I would have voted for Trump. I probably would have voted for Jill Stein, if I'm being totally honest, because my vote would have been in California, where Harris is going to win anyway. I would rather contribute to, the growth of the Green Party and, give a protest vote on behalf of the Muslims and the Palestinians than vote for Trump. So that's probably what I would have done. But just being completely honest with you, I did not vote this cycle. A lot of people did, though. And I'm glad that they did, because the results, as we're going to talk about, made me very happy. But before we go into that, I just want to share this rant that I did with you, because this is where I'm at as of today. And I think this is kind of like one of those things where it's like a Facebook rant I would have posted to my family and friends, but I don't do that anymore, because I value my relationships, and you can't have these conversations with certain people. So I'm going to share it with y'all instead. So this is what I said post 2024 election. And as you can see down here in the corner, the hashtag Trump cheated is already trending. But this is what I said. The main reason that liberals are so angry right now is people who work for a living, poor people, truck drivers, gas station attendants, etc., just took power away from the cunty media and office types whose lives are ruled by superficial decorum and HR rules. The kind of people that are upset about Tony Hinchcliffe, which obviously had zero effect on, the election. And I mean, honestly, at that point in the game, the people that were voting for Trump were voting for Trump. The people that were voting for Harris were voting for Harris. That was not going to change anything. That was not going to change any minds as hard as they tried to make it a thing. So I continued. The oversensitive, sheltered middle management class just lost political power. That's what makes them the most mad about the massive L they just took to Trump. The snobs lost to the slobs. Now, I can say this from personal experience, because I'm not going to go into the details, but I got canceled at work for being too masculine and microaggressions and all that stuff. And I don't hold a grudge for, I hold a grudge against the low T middle management types, but not women. I think that I don't think most women care about stuff like that, but there are people that will use that to, it's cry bullying, basically. It's the kind of stuff that a certain country that takes a lot of our money does. They start an argument with you, and then when you hit them with something, they clutch their pearls and go, "Oh my God, I was attacked." So anyway, the snobs lost to the slobs. The snooty, self-righteous, condescending liberals who thought they were smarter than everyone else The people who disingenuously smeared the Bernie Sanders movement as misogynist bros are now being forced to grapple with the reality that they're actually the naive dummies. Hypnotized cult members who walled themselves into a DNC media safe room where a demented Joe Biden was a viable candidate only 3 months ago. And still, they're totally ignorant to what this election means for the corporate media, the DNC, and the lefty pundits here in cold, hard reality. So that was the kind of crescendo of my rant there. And, you know, if you've been paying attention, you know that the kind of left versus right paradigm is over, especially now when you look at, and we're going to go through some of this stuff in detail. So let's celebrate now the Democrats' massive L. And again, I say this just to kind of package that up nicely and seal it off here. The Democrats deserve to lose was the point of all that. Time and time again, they have pretended to be this like progressive force of positive change in their marketing. And then when the rubber meets the road, they're the fucking neocons. I kept one of my cousins who was trying to get me to vote for Harris. I kept asking her, did you vote for a war in Ukraine when you voted for Biden? Did you vote for a genocide in Gaza when you voted for Biden? Did you vote for, $8 eggs per carton? Like, what, did you vote for any of this shit? Because I didn't. And the Democrats continually, and this time, thankfully, despite all of their best efforts, the build up to this election, they threw every goddamn thing they could through the media at Trump. And thank Jesus, the fucking American people are like, nah, dude, you just told us that Biden was a viable candidate for president. Nothing you say after that has any meaning whatsoever. Do you remember and I should have pulled it up, but Matt Orfala did that brilliant piece of all the pundits saying like, Biden is sharp as a tack. He's this is the best Biden ever. Those are the people that you have to actually take serious to believe that, some general said Trump loves Hitler or whatever the fucking jack off story they're running this week is. It's pathetic. So how pathetic is it? We're about to get into that. Before we do, I just want to play this for you one more time. This is gonna be coming up quite a bit. I tried so hard and got so far. So let's start with one of my all-time favorite comedians, Ricky Gervais. And he did this rant. He did this rant way before the election, but after Taylor Swift and Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B and every goddamn Eminem and who else? LeBron and every goddamn Hollywood. So that's the other thing I love so much about this. Fuck all those people. Oh my God. These pretentious cunts who think that like their stance on politics matters to anyone. Taylor Swift and fucking, even Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan, fuck them too. You know what I mean? Like, get the fuck out of here. No one cares what especially you guys, but especially, Taylor Swift and all these. Anyway, Ricky Gervais was lampooning these people way before the election was over. And this is just absolutely incredible.
Comedian Ricky Gervais has weighed into the US presidential election by poking fun at celebrities who claim they know best when it comes to politics.
Hi guys, Ricky G here, wellness and beauty influencer. As a celebrity, I know all about stuff, like science and politics. So trust me when I tell you who you should vote for.
He went on to mock some of those in Hollywood for the over-the-top reactions we've been seeing when they endorse candidates and some of the fear that is getting spread aimed at anyone who may be thinking about voting for the other side.
If you don't vote the right way, that's like a hate crime. It makes me sad and angry, and I'll leave the country. And you don't want that.
This message from his bathtub was posted to X in June, but influencer accounts are resharing it now as we see more and more celebrities speak out about who to vote for. Last week, Jennifer Lopez threw her support behind Kamala Harris in a very emotional speech.
I promise my...
So this is great too. All the fake crying is my absolute favorite. All this like the waterworks that these people went to. But another great thing about this clip is she kind of recaps a lot of this celebrity cringe that I didn't catch in my last rant.
Myself, I wouldn't get emotional. But you know what? You know what? We should be emotional. We should be upset. We should be scared and outraged. We should.
Over the weekend, rapper Cardi B endorsed Kamala Harris, but her content is raising eyebrows.
I believe in every word that comes out of her mouth.
So I don't know if you saw this either, but there was a whole thing on Twitter where when Cardi B got on the stage, the teleprompter didn't work, so someone had to bring her a phone to read the script off of.
She's passionate. She's compassionate. She shows empathy. And most of all, she is not delusional. Yeah.
I would cut in there.
I tried so hard and got so far.
Yeah. Kamala recognized that this country is at risk, that the economy needs to get stronger, that the cost of food and the cost of living is too high. Damn, it's even high for me.
We need to turn the page on the administration that made the cost of everything so high. The one that Kamala Harris is the VP of. Like, thank God Americans aren't that stupid that they bought this dumb shit. I mean, a lot of people did, but
I believe her
Trump
when
is
she
scary.
says, under her, buying eggs and milk won't break the bank.
The rapper is receiving backlash for this speech. Many online are pointing out that the rapper failed to mention that prices have soared around 20% under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, we know the vice president has been receiving countless endorsements from pop stars and big names in Hollywood, such as Taylor Swift, Jennifer Aniston, and now actor Harrison Ford has come out with this inspiring...
Ooh, Harrison Ford. All the kids were waiting to hear what Harrison Ford had to say. Weren't they? Jesus Christ.
Message.
The truth is this: Kamala Harris will protect your right to disagree with her about policies or ideas. And then, as we have done for centuries, we'll debate them.
This election, stars are also throwing their support behind Donald Trump, including Hulk Hogan.
This is the other thing that I think, like, it's almost like these ads that the celebrities did this cycle were just ads for how out of touch they are with reality, because the complete opposite of what Harrison Ford just said is the truth, right? The Democratic regime censored doctors even for misinformation. Anyone that was a critic of any of the wars is censored for misinformation. And it's actually, Trump is a victim of that censorship. So the idea that they're going to protect your right to debate, are you fucking high, Harrison Ford? Yeah, probably on a lot of, the drips that they give elderly people. But, again, it's like, who's waiting for Harrison Ford's take on the election? That's what's so funny about these cunts. They're like, oh, I got to get out and say something because the people are waiting to hear what I have to think about this. No, they're not. I don't even think that. And I do a weekly show where all I do is talk about what I think about.
Kid Rock, and TMZ is reporting that Mel Gibson will be voting for Donald Trump. So what difference do celebrity endorsements actually make? According to a recent YouGov poll, 11% of Americans say a celebrity has caused them to reconsider their stance on a political issue, and 7% say they have supported a political candidate because of a celebrity endorsement. But if we look back in history, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign showed that star power is not always enough. Will it make a difference this time? We'll find out very soon, because there is just 2 days to go until Election Day in the United States. Sky News host Paul Murray has...
Obviously, this aired before the election, and, none of that happened. But let's watch just a little bit more of this before we pivot to some additional cringe.
Latest from Dallas, Texas.
something you need to know about this election and about why people lose their nut in America when their side loses. Put simply,
Lose their
this
nut.
weekend, both sides.
I love the way these Aussies talk. Why people in America lose their nut. Cheers to you, Australia. You guys are fucking cool.
Sides are being told by their silos on the internet that they are definitely winning the election. First, the Dems.
I have sources inside the Kamala Harris operation, and I can tell you this. As of this morning, Kamala Harris and her people are 100% confident. They're not in the least bit worried. They are 100% confident, and they're saying, do not worry about it. Don't worry about the polls. Don't listen to the polls. We have this in the bag.
When you see left wingers,
okay, so listen, the comparison that they make here is pretty funny because they're trying to be fair, but I am not a fan of Dan Bongino, I'll be honest, but what that guy said was completely false, and it's based on anonymous gossip, which is what they do. Like, I don't know if you saw right before the election, a poll came out that Kamala Harris is now suddenly leading in Iowa because some dumb fuck at the Des Moines Register who wants her to win said that. There's no data behind it. It's some fucking unfounded gossip that some bullshit someone says, and they run with this as a news story. Now, listen, look at the example they use as the Republican version of this right here. This is great.
Us, not me. I'm not a left winger. Already going, this guy did it, that guy did it, this guy did it, that guy did it. You know, behind the scenes, there is an absolute panic fest breaking out. They got Xanax everywhere. They're taking them like Tic Tacs at this point.
So he's just saying they're panicking behind the scenes. He didn't say Trump's definitely going to win, you know? And so I love that kind of comparison there because it kind of misses the point.
Now, both sides, someone's lying here, all right? Clearly, both sides are not going to win, and this thing is either going to be a squeak or...
See, this guy, better news in Australia than I expected, but he's like, someone's lying here. Yes, clearly, and we just found out who that was, didn't we?
It's going to be a blowout, and we all know all the different reasons why. In fact, on the prediction sites, the betting markets, all of that, it's really tightened. Now, whether that's because they're taking the each-way bet and they don't want to be wrong, depending on which one's going to win, but have a look at this. The 538 website, which again takes polls and a whole bunch of other data to try to work out what's going on, 5149. When they run on their computers, what's going to happen.
Remember when 538 was like the most credible thing you could ever say? Because they're like, oh, they predicted some win during the Obama era. And then all of a sudden after that, Nate Silver was like this data god for like a year or something. And then ever since then, he's been wrong about like everything. And people still are like, yeah, 538. Oh, that's great. No, it's not.
Tuesday here, Wednesday, of course, in Australia. The bloke who used to work for that business, but is now out on his own again. The best part of 51 to 48 right now. Because of that poll in Iowa,
look at that
change in the betting market.
That's actually not far. So what he just said, I got to correct myself now. Silver no longer works at 538, so he must have sold that brand off. And this is his prediction, which is actually pretty close to accurate. Because Trump won the popular vote by about 4 million votes. So once all the votes are counted in the big states like California and stuff, it's still a huge win, but it's popular vote wise, the margin is a little bit narrow. It's the margin of the popular vote is actually probably about that once you tally it all. Like a 2% win or something, like 2 or 3% win for Trump.
Markets, it was about 60-40. We're now down to about 53 to 47 right now.
So anyway, I don't want to keep with this. I don't like the horse race stuff.
Over time.
I just want to keep going on the pre-election cringe. So this is what the reason I'm so happy that Trump won is because of stuff like this, because it proved to me, and I said this before the election, you can go back and watch the tape. This election is basically the big thing for me with this election. I don't care about Trump or Kamala. I think they're pretty much cut from the same cloth for the most part. We'll see. Maybe Trump will surprise me and exceed expectations. But for me, this election was about legacy media versus new media, and new media won. And so this right here is the kind of stuff that just makes me so happy that Trump won, regardless of what you think about any of the politics. this shit is dead. And I like what Mays says here. He goes, this is what has destroyed politics. They don't believe any of this stuff will happen now. It was just to scare people into voting like them. Never stop mocking them. They did the same thing with abortion. And I showed this, how, you know, a bunch of my female relatives like, oh, I got to vote for Kamala to save abortion rights. Like, first of all, you're not even sexually active and you're like post-menopausal. So the idea that you're ever going to need an abortion to begin with is a joke. Second of all, abortion is legal nationally. Google mifepristone. It's an abortion pill that the Supreme Court just unanimously upheld because there's a pharma lobby behind it. So abortion's legal nationally in the same way that Viagra is. As long as you shut your fucking mouth and order the pills quietly and don't tell anyone, it's legal. Anyway, let's watch some of this.
What would a second Donald Trump term look like?
Well, he cannot be the next president. Because if he is,
You can't imagine the things that he's going to do. Mexico.
I honestly, you know, forgive me for continually interrupting here. That's what I do, though. But I honestly think that whole like leaning on Liz Cheney thing in the build up to the election is what really lost it for him.
Canada. We can't go to Canada because eventually Canada will become annexed to America.
And shoot visitors to the White House. Yeah. That means he can shoot the first lady.
We're going to see violence, the likes of which we didn't even see on January 6th.
Yeah.
Make it illegal to run against him, to throw his opponents in jail, to shut down the media.
He will make himself into the Fuhrer, and he will make everybody raise their hand and salute him.
Using martial law against the American people.
Terminate the Constitution.
So Michael, that Michael Cohen guy that they were just interviewing, I love how in the Trump era, like anyone that's just a traitor to Trump is a good person. And it's clear that guy is like just a pathological liar and a dude with a flimsy morals. And again, not that Trump has great morals or anything, but it's funny that they like just go to these people as if they're experts. That Cohen guy, like, what the fuck is that guy doing being talked to as if he has any expertise?
To rewrite the Constitution.
Create mass internment camps.
Throw everyone into Gitmo.
Might be sent to jail or their rights might be suppressed, especially minority groups in society.
You might have any number of things happen to you and your family.
Every one of us, our freedom, our liberty, none of us is safe.
He's going to have people around him executing against an enemy's list.
Assassinate generals.
Ordering troops to attack American citizens. Trump's very well-armed and extremist base will try to kill people.
He's going to basically burn the house down.
he will unravel the institutions of our democracy.
Draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler.
Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini.
Makes Donald Trump even more dangerous.
Wants to take away your vote. Senate and the House are immediately going to be paralyzed.
People will begin in their minds to censor themselves. They might say,
That's already,
well, maybe I shouldn't.
The best part about all of this is it's pure unadulterated projection. He'll weaponize the justice system. He'll censor people.
This is the end of democracy. Yeah.
I think that could be the end of our democracy.
Democracy is dead if Trump is reelected.
Cozy up to Putin that democracy will be at risk.
The absolute destruction of the Justice Department as we know it.
Okay, I want to take a quick sidebar because that democracy thing, that is the thing that bothers me the most. This talk of, if Trump wins, it's going to threaten our democracy. It's the end of democracy. People voting for someone we don't like is the end of democracy. And you probably see me run the video I made because MSNBC did a whole piece about how white rural voters are a threat to democracy. And so I cut that up to say, just voters you just cut the white rural part off and it's voters are a threat to democracy. Well, someone put together this reel and it's actually so good. It's basically they took a reel of people saying, this and that is a threat to democracy. And they turned it into, they used AI to replace democracy with bureaucracy. And I just got to find this piece because I don't think I dug it up in advance. In the meantime, though, watch this. Because This is what I really wanted from this election, a repeat of this. This is 2016. And that's what I got. So I was very happy about this repeat here. All right. I'm going to have to find that clip. So this is another pre-election gem from Rachel Maddow. And Rachel's decline has been one of the saddest to me because I was a huge Maddow fan back in the day. But this kind of goes back to the, they try to, the manufacturing consent thing right before the election, all these articles and stuff come out, like, people come out, Trump's a Nazi, you can't vote for him, it's going to end democracy. But then they also do this thing where they're like, oh, there's a secret result that shows that Kamala's about to win it. And I don't know if this helps that much because I think it kind of like suppresses vote. A lot of her people who might have ran out to vote for her, like, oh, well, she's going to win anyway. But check this out. This is great.
In which there are good polls. And particularly where in some states there is a gold standard pollster who appears to be unaffected by larger dynamics that are making everybody whine about the polls. And the reason those individual pollsters get the gold standard designation is both because of their proven sound methodology, but also—
So this is a quick random sidebar, but I actually in high school, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out here who did this, worked for a polling company. I worked for a survey research company when I was in high school called the Worthland Group. Richard Worthland was a guy who worked with Reagan. So we did market research. And it was at that time that I kind of learned the reality of polling. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so cynical about it. But I'm going to give you a really clear example. And I think this is interesting. One of my little sidebar stories. It's actually really interesting. So this was in Utah. And we did surveys for like GM, General Motors. I literally would like go into work high after school and be sitting on the phone with like a General Motors employee while they ranted about how it's all Chiefs and no Indians and they have 10 managers and stuff. But we did a survey at one point and the client of the survey was anonymous, not anonymous, but classified or, we weren't allowed to know. The survey was clearly for the LDS church. And the whole thing was push polling. And the reason I say that is when we started doing this survey, there were very specific instructions on how we had to read the wording. And every time we talked about the Mormon church, we had to read out in its entirety, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So anytime in that survey, and there were multiple times. So it's like, you get to the end of this 10-minute questionnaire and you've just been saying the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over and over and over again. And then one of the last questions is, now, based on what you know, do you think that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a Christian church? And, 9 out of 10 respondents are like, yeah, I think they are. And so the Mormons got the data they wanted from that survey that like, yeah, people believe that the Mormon church is a Christian church. So they could go out to the press and feed that out and say like, yeah, see, people know we're Christians. We're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Anyway. So I have on the ground experience with polling.
Also because of their track record over time in that particular jurisdiction. And the prototypical example of a gold standard poll is the Iowa poll done by Ann Selzer, by J. Ann Selzer in Iowa. The polls that she produces for the Des Moines Register in Iowa, specifically the final Iowa polls she does before each major election, her polls are known for their uncanny predictive accuracy. This is Ann Selzer's recent track record. I mean, what you see here is in each election year, what her final poll said the result would be in Iowa. Next to that is what the actual result was on election day. And as you can see, if you look at the Senate and presidential races since 2012, her poll has accurately predicted the winner of the Senate and presidential races in Iowa within 1 or 2 points every time. There was a governor's race in 2018 where things went a little bit gang of glay, but in Senate and presidential races, you have seen Ann Seltzer basically as a living bullseye. And that's why lots of people had strong reactions when the Des Moines Register Ann Selzer Iowa poll was posted last night. This is that poll, and it is a shock result. It shows Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump by 3 points in Iowa. And the reason this is consequential to our psyche is that if this is accurate, and if anybody is accurate, it's likely to be Ann Selzer in the Iowa poll. If this is accurate, this implies that Harris might be winning Iowa. 3 points, granted, it's within the margin of error here, but it's 3 points. Iowa is a state where neither campaign has spent any time or resources since the primaries. They don't have a ground game there. They don't have ads up there. Trump won Iowa by 8 points last time and 9 points the time before that. Nobody thinks of it as a swing state. A Democratic presidential candidate hasn't won Iowa since Barack Obama in 2012. But here she is with a lead. In addition to that top line lead, the poll's internal numbers show dynamics in terms of women voters, and particularly older women voters, that could, again, if they hold, have really major implications beyond Iowa. I mean, the Iowa poll shows that women who are political independents favor Harris by nearly 30 points. Women over the age of...
All right, let's move on from that. So, of course, the cope is strong. And, you know, I was waiting for all kinds of stuff from all kinds of insane people to begin, like, you know, once the results and the tallies were finalized. But this, more than anything, is what I was expecting from our good friend, Keith Olbermann.
I heart porn star dick. Now, I'll confess that I have licked Joe Biden's dick all the way through since 1975.
So check this out. Here's Olbermann's cope. Extreme
On the
cope.
Wednesday Countdown podcast, Russia has committed an act of war against this nation. We were attacked last night. Regardless of the outcome of the presidential election,
I heart feces.
as certainly as if Russia had bombed and not merely threatened with a terrorist attack,
I heart
32
porn star
polling
dick.
stations in one Georgia county, many in another Georgia county, between them the home of 1/4 of the entire black population of the state of Georgia,
I heart
and also in the states of
feces.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona. Russian interference in this country's elections dates back to at least 2016. It has been proven time and time again, and at times the government of this country has buried the information, even though it was available in plain sight.
So there's that copium.
Now, I'll confess that I have licked Joe Biden's dick all the way through since 1975.
So after all of this, of course, too, a bunch of the progressive grifters came out and complained. You know, it's so obvious when you see people like Kyle and Crystal. You know, we've talked about this so many times, but it's just gotten to a level where it's absolutely pathetic, where you can tell exactly. They're like, oh yeah, you know, we're kind of progressive, and then as soon as it gets to the election, they're like, oh, you gotta vote for Harris because Trump is the devil. They're such fakes. But of all of those examples of people getting it really wrong and having to suffer for it, this is probably my favorite. And this is, of course, not a guy that I really think about much, but why does anyone watch guys like David Pakman and Sam Cedar and Crystal and Kyle to begin with, when you could just tune into any shitlib bullshit like MSNBC or Pod Save America and get the exact same takes? Maybe Crystal and Kyle kind of like dress it up a little more in like progressive shit. Like, oh yeah, see, I'm kind of progressive. Whatever, really. But so does this guy.
When I woke up this morning, we had lost 5,000 YouTube subscribers compared to where we were last night. Now, the first thing I thought was, is this a...
I haven't even ever had 5,000 YouTube subscribers. So, hey, I've only been doing this for like a year and a half, but
glitch. We've been on YouTube for 15 years or something like that. And subscribers always just go up. They just never go down. They go up. Is something wrong with my channel? Is someone attacking my channel? What's going on? So I started texting. And I texted Brian.
Is someone attacking my channel? You know, I wonder. I've seen the ratings and the median viewership age for MSNBC and CNN. It's like 70 years old. I would be curious to see these guys' stats, like what their core audience is. I mean, I'll tell you, mine is like, I think it skews mostly male, but it's you know, like 30 plus basically, you know, if I really look at the numbers, like if I'm looking at the analytics. I would be curious, like when you're a guy like David Pakman who has like millions of subscribers or whatever, I wonder what his demo looks like, his core demo actually looks like.
Tyler Cohen, and I texted Tyler Cohen, Brian Cohen, and Brian Tyler, all of them. I texted all of them.
All the Cohens, Michael Cohen.
I texted Luke Beasley and Farron Cousins and Sam Cedar. And
that is like a list of veritable brunch lib shit balls. Bread tube. I think that's like the bread tube bakery he just listed right there. Welcome to the bread tube bakery with David Pakman, Sam Cedar, some other cunts, the leftist mafia.
Every single one of our channels since last night is hemorrhaging subscribers. What is it that is going on? Here is a graphic. As you can see, subscribers just go up, up, up.
Here's what's been going on. You spent the last 4 years telling everyone to vote for the Democrats, and they finally woke up after that electoral, well-deserved electoral spanking.
Up, and they are down. It is not just YouTube subscribers. We are seeing record cancellations of paid memberships. Record cancellations. These are the people that keep the show running. Now, for a moment, I thought, if it's just YouTube, maybe YouTube is purging people who are inactive subscribers. And once a year, usually YouTube does this, and you see a little decline. And then numbers.
Schadenfreude here. I love that he's like detailing all of it too. He's like going into it to like, it's not just YouTube. We're losing followers everywhere. They know we're frauds.
Let's go back up. They're not doing it. They're not doing it. And if that were the case, we wouldn't be seeing paid membership cancellation.
It's almost like all the copium we were selling before this giant electoral spanking didn't work out the way we had intended. And the people that subscribed because of that copium canceled their subscriptions when they realized they were just being lied to, like they are when they tune into CNN or MSNBC.
On the website. So now I understand what is going on. It's terrifying, but it is happening. A lot of people.
By the way, guys, support Ukraine. Ukraine is so important. We need to support Ukraine because Putin is so terrible.
They're checking out. I heard anecdotally from a couple dozen people who said, you know, David, I just can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. I'm checking out. I'm out. And the reason that this is terrifying, not only because it puts everybody in left-wing media, it terrifies me because our instinct is the opposite of what the right does, and we will get crushed if this is the way we respond to a defeat. The right wants us not to exist.
You just did get crushed, and you just detailed how crushed you got to us.
The right wants to decimate independent progressive media. And so when I lose 5,000 subscribers...
Okay, again, how can these people say this shit with a straight face? How can these people say this shit with a straight face after the last several years? The right wants to decimate indie media. Indie media just elected the president, you dip fuck.
and Brian loses thousands and Ring of Fire loses thousands and everybody's losing thousands of subscribers. Understand that when the right loses,
so it's funny because I don't want to keep listening to this. That's enough of douchebag here, but this happened to people like us a long time ago, right? Do you remember the first Bernie cycle, the second Bernie cycle, when Crystal and Kyle and all and TYT and all these cunts were trying to tell us to vote for Joe Biden? That's when I tuned out. That's when Jimmy Dore, took off because he was the voice of people like us who were like, fuck the Democrats. And I don't know why it took so long. I guess the Trump derangement thing worked really well for long enough. But I remember, when Trump won, I flashed back to this. It's probably a piece I did a long time ago, but Tim Pool was in Iowa during the Republican primaries. And there was a kid who got interviewed at a Vivek Ramaswamy event. And the kid his question was like, look, I like you, Vivek, but I need to vote for Trump because I want to show the establishment that what they're doing to him is not okay. And I think that was kind of the general sentiment of the country when you look at it, outside the brainwashed shitlib ecosystem. People could see what was going on and they went, oh, fuck. Like, even if I don't like Trump, we can't allow this shit to be happening because it's going to happen to the left next. So just sticking with that, here's what this is what Nancy Pelosi said about the election process, the nomination process with Kamala Harris. I'm sorry.
Said you wanted a sort of an open primary if Joe Biden stepped down. Did you change your mind because you saw all the excitement around Kamala Harris?
No, I didn't change my mind. We had an open primary and she won it. Nobody else got in the race because she was politically astute. And
you had reportedly said you wanted a sort of an open.
So again, it's who buys that shit? What voter, a lot of people did. And in the wake of this, these are the kind of people that liberals have become. And a lot of them, I still don't think see it, but this is just one of the most egregious examples of absolute dumb fuckery that I saw post-election. The person who wrote an article about how they didn't want lockdowns to end because they fear white people is a Nation correspondent and frequent MSNBC guest. If Democrats want to be taken seriously, they need to purge these people, kind of like labor unions did Stalinists. I am not ready to re-enter white society as the pandemic. Yeah, so like this guy, this Elie Mystal guy, what a joke of a person. And that's the kind of stuff, there is right-wing extremism, right? There are people on the right that are extreme and they do have fascist leanings. That's not the new Republican Party when you listen to the way they're talking. You listen to JD Vance on Joe Rogan. He's like, we're not out to put people in jail for smoking weed, or we're not out to stop gay marriage. We just want some sensible policies in place. Like, hey, you can't get a tattoo if you're 18, so you shouldn't be able to get a sex change. I mean, I think that's pretty common sense. No one's hating trans people with that. No one's hating gay people with that. Like, people should be allowed to be what they want, but just like getting a tattoo, like that's a life-altering thing, it's just common sense, So a couple more little just things I want to touch on before we move on is there was, so speaking about staying on the theme here of right-wing extremists, there's this guy Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes just says dumb shit. And I saw this reaction to Nick Fuentes, something he said, and it's so clearly like, it's like Andrew Tate level trolling. It's designed to upset a certain demographic of people. And I just want to make sure you guys know, like, don't fall for this shit because it's so stupid. Is it this one or this one? Yeah, here it is. So check this out. So this guy is, you're the same incel freaks who cried about women choosing the bear are now saying your body, my choice. And he cites Nick Fuentes right here. Now, first of all, consider the vagaries of that. It's kind of like you could argue that this post is about COVID vaccinations if you wanted to, because it's pretty vague. He's not specifically talking to women. It might even just be like a criticism of the Democratic Party. But this guy is so triggered by it, he has to go and make a meme about what a terrible person Nick Fuentes is. And I just think it's beneath you if you have any kind of rational thought. Like, why focus on dumb shit like that? So one last little piece of liberal cringe leading up to the election before we move on. This was one of the biggest things for me that it makes me want to, it makes me have violent thoughts. Let's put it that way. When you think about guys like Paul Krugman, who sit in like a marble stone office and corner office at the New York Times and write articles about how the economy is great and the people paying $12 for a dozen eggs are just tripping. I think that was kind of one of the biggest things that lost the Democrats big time, because they're just so out of touch with the reality on the ground. So this is Glenn Greenwald kind of commenting on Chris Hayes, or I would call him Keith Olbermann III. It's like there's Keith Olbermann, then there's Keith Olbermann II, which is Rachel Maddow, and then there's Keith Olbermann III, which is Chris Hayes here.
More good economic news today with a new inflation report coming in better than expected. Prices rose just 3% in June annualized compared to the same time last year. You see that curve, that up and that down? That's what you like to see. That is the...
Here's the graph that shows, this is basically what he's saying right here. I love this. Prices didn't go up as much this year as they did last year, and you should be happy about that, even though you're still paying $12 for a carton of eggs.
Lowest increase we've seen since March of 2021. That black line means that inflation is going down. Now, another key metric shows that wages are continuing to rise faster than inflation. This is like the most important thing. Average hourly earnings rose 0.4% from May to June compared to inflation at 0.2%. And compared to last year, wages are up a strong 4.4%. We have a lot of data showing that in many respects, our economy is doing astoundingly well. But Americans on the whole are just not feeling it. Recent AP poll found.
Just to go back to my original post and the kind of the genesis of this whole conversation, snobs versus slobs is the dynamic here. These snobby fucks are going to go on TV and explain to you slobs why you should eat your gruel paste and be happy about it, right? And none of these guys, I'm sure he makes comparable amount of money to Rachel Maddow. They sit at a nice cush office and they collect their $30,000 a day or whatever the fuck they make. And, maybe they deserve it. I'm not arguing that. People should be able to make money. I'm not anti, people making money. But it's very clear why people like this get paid the big bucks, because they get paid to spin trash into, like some kind of a cloud with a silver lining, with the intellectual silver lining. So, what Rachel Maddow does is take shit that doesn't make sense and, twist it into these intellectual knots so it kind of does make sense. She tries to explain away, the more I watched her, the more I realized what she does. She explains away the nonsensical parts of things, like the Russiagate shit. Oh, well, it doesn't matter that the proof we have that the DNC server hack was done by, a company that the Democratic Party employed and paid because XYZ did XYZ. That's the kind of world these people live in. And now the crowning jewel of this shit libbery, this shit lib fiesta, postal, I don't know if it's a fiesta, shit lib funeral, I guess is probably a better term for it here. I've been waiting for a minute to do this piece on Kimmy Jimmel, and I've got a banger for you right now, because I think that this guy has just been one of the worst for a very long time. So, I threw a Karen wig on him and turned him into Kimmy Jimmel. And you'll be hearing a lot more from Kimmy in the future. But this is the politics debut for you right here of Kimmy Jimmel. Let's watch.
Let's be honest, it was a terrible night last night. It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
It was a really bad night for people who do blackface, as you can tell. It made guys who have, in recent years, like just this is not even that long ago, made guys who do blackface have to fake cry on TV. So that's about the size of the Kimmy Jimmel, as I like to call her, fiasco. And absolutely the crown jewel of all the cringe. And I'll be honest, I hoped, like I said, for a Trump victory for this very reason, just so I could watch these completely out of touch celebrities cry that their influence is slim to none, slim shady to none. So let's move on. I really, this is kind of a quick throw in for me. I didn't really intend to talk much about this, but I just think, now that Trump has won the presidency, we have to deal with kind of the material realities on the ground, right? And those material realities are that the Republicans not only took the presidency, but the House most likely, and definitely the Senate. So they're going to have a lot of power. And despite all the fear mongering about the Nazism and the far right and all that shit, the far right are the Democrats right now, as they showed you in the buildup to the election by trotting out Liz Cheney. But there's glimmers of hope, I think, in a lot of this. We just saw, for example, the online push to make sure Trump doesn't nominate Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley to a slot in the administration. That was successful. Trump came out and said, hey, fine, I heard you guys. I'm not going to put Pompeo or Haley in there. Now, does that mean we should just be like, okay, great, we're going to go back to sleep now? No, of course, you got to be vigilant with this kind of stuff. But I think that the reality on the ground, again, is that people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard are in the mix. And I've already seen, stories that, Trump says RFK Jr. isn't going to be part of his administration now. We'll see. I haven't seen anything that's confirmable. Again, it's that anonymous gossip. It's stories that are sourced from anonymous gossip. So this actual clip right here gave me some hope, and it was reposted by Rania Kalik, but it is if you're my age, you might know this guy. I know who this guy is because my son was into him, but Sneeko, who's a famous YouTuber, and he's at a MAGA celebration, and he gets approached by Rabbi Shmuley. And again, the reason I brought up Tulsi and RFK is because in the buildup to the election, they were, visibly out there with this guy. And I even responded to this post and tagged both of them and said, hey, what do Tulsi and RFK think about this? But if you haven't seen this, this is encouraging. Let's put it that way. Listen to this. So this is from Rania Kalik. And here you go. Check this out. Good stuff.
I love Israel? No, I'm not gonna. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm free Palestine. I don't support anything you do. I think you're a disgrace. This is for Trump right now. I don't want to have this discussion. I don't need to speak to you. I'm a disgrace? Yeah, I think everything you stand for is a disgrace. Oh, me? You know who I am? Yes, of course I do. Hey, you know who I am? Of course I do.
I see. This is the thing I love about, this kind of stage in our political evolution you're a fucking disgrace. Like, I love that guy doesn't have any reservation of telling Rabbi Shmuley exactly what he is, because he is a disgrace.
That's my question. Who do you have allegiance to?
I have allegiance to that flag that you are disgracing.
Why do you come here with an Israel flag?
Second.
Why do you come here with an Israel flag?
Right now,
I saw you with an Israel flag.
Of course, I love Israel. It's
Okay.
America's greatest
So go to
ally.
Israel.
Absolutely.
Greatest ally. What do they give us?
Let me ask you.
What does Israel give us?
What
question.
What does Israel give you?
Yeah.
The most essential intelligence about whether or not we're going to be attacked.
Bombs.
Did you hear that? That's the gift that we get. Intelligence. Oh, yeah. There's one thing we know about intelligence in America. It's how intelligent it is. Just a long history of like mistakes and wars for fucking bullshit reasons where tons and tons of people die without any kind of real merit. Yeah, thanks for that intelligence.
Well, Israel gives us this
what happened on 9/11
in the Middle East. Did
Of course Israel did 9/11. Of course Israel did 9/11.
This disgusting Jew
Disgusting.
What else did we do?
I would also like to thank whoever posted this for editing out the trigger words that they would get me AI, removed from any platform.
Did we kill ourselves?
I don't know. You started a dildo business with your daughters. What you did? I saw you dance on a child at a wedding.
No, sir.
You
No,
twerk
sir.
on
No,
children.
sir. Why did you tell him
You
to go back?
twerk on children? I didn't see that. I did see the dildo business.
What are you talking about?
So was I. Where should I go?
You're the only one
should I go?
who has allegiance to another country. You should fuck off to Israel. If you have allegiance to this, you came here with an Israel flag.
No allegiance. We did 9/11.
He doesn't have a flag of Africa on him. Shoot the Haitian flag. You came here with an Israel flag.
Jew hatred.
Who hates Jews?
Anti-Semitism.
We know you. We know who you are.
Look at this. Another idiot. Are you a don't touch.
So there you have it. The new generation of political activists has balls. This ain't no Bernie Sanders movement where we just tuck our tail between our legs and run the other way and fold into the establishment when we're uncomfortable. And I applaud especially the Abandon Harris movement. I think they're largely, they have a big part in Trump's win. And to Trump's credit, he did go to Michigan and talk to Muslims and promise them he was going to work on peace. Whether it's all lip service or not, at least he's talking to them. It's more than you can say for the Democrats who, pretty much just use them as window dressing and then ignore them when it gets down to brass tacks. So let's go to the comments for a minute, see if there's anything interesting over here. Oh, wow. There's a lot of comments from his camp. Oh, yeah. Okay. We got Willie up in here. De Niro Winfrey 2028. Yeah, let's hope so. Eminem Hunter Biden 2028. I love that. And we got my boy Willie in the mix here. The rest is like kind of comments. It's Trump is a Fed. He's no different from the Clintons, dude. We'll see. Listen. I would normally just be like, yeah, of course. But if he's such a Fed, why did they throw the entire weight of the establishment at him to keep him out of there? It's odd. That's the question that I can't answer. Like the assassination attempts, that wasn't staged, bro. Like people died at that, and the Washington Post coming out and calling him a Nazi and the way that they clutched their pearls over Liz Cheney. Like, this is the other thing, bro. The guy who runs the Atlantic, let me just put this back up so you know what I'm talking about. He said Trump is no different than the Clintons. He's a Fed. So what I'm talking about here is if that's the case, why do you think guys like, and I'm just asking this question, maybe you have an answer for it, but why do you think the Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic and Robert Kagan resigned from the Washington Post, the editors, these deep state neocons? Why are they so anti-Trump? They're, and that's the other, I brought that up just in relation to Israel, because people are like, oh, Trump's not going to be any different on Israel. Well, if that's the case, Jeffrey Goldberg, the guy from the Atlantic, was an IDF prison guard. You know what I mean? Robert Kagan, who was the editor at the Washington Post until Jeff Bezos declined to endorse Kamala Harris, was a rabid neocon. His wife is Victoria Nuland, who started the Ukraine war. and worked for Clinton's State Department and worked for Dick Cheney. The Cheneys came out in full force against Trump. So maybe he's a Fed. But I don't think that they would throw all that weight against him if he was a Fed. That's my only. And if you have explanations for that stuff, I'd love to hear them. But that's the thing that kind of puts it at odds for me. I don't really see that happening. So there's a lot of Joe Rogan has done a lot of good content post the let's do that last. I think what I would like to talk about next here is Trump's kind of evolving cabinet or administration. And I told a lot of people, like, if you watch my channel because you're pro-Trump, you're gonna be mad if he wins, because my focus is gonna turn to being critical. And the thing I love about the kind of podcast sphere, the world that we exist in here, is that people are honest. I've already seen people like Dave Smith and a lot of the people that were behind Trump being very analytical and skeptical about what's happening right now as he kind of is getting ready to make the transition into the White House. And so I want to start with this is a tweet that Elon put out about the new Trump's new chief of staff. And for, I know women are upset that they didn't get the presidency, but I guess it is historic that Trump nominated one of the first female chief of staffs right here with Susie Wiles. So Elon Musk tweets out, Susie Wiles is great. West Wing woman. Trump makes history, names campaign co-chair, first ever female White House chief of staff. And this woman, Susie Wiles, she kind of looks a little like Victoria Nuland in a wig. When you get close up on her, I'm like, is that Victoria Nuland in a different outfit or something? But the reason I bring this up is, it's great to celebrate, first woman chief of staff and all that stuff. But your boy Lee Fong has a piece about this woman and where she comes from. So, I'm not saying that she's a bad person, but this is the type of stuff that you want to think about as we move into this new era. And these are the types of criticisms, valid criticisms, we need to be focusing on if we actually want anything to change. Because the big thing about Trump winning, the best thing about it, whether you like Trump or not, is it's a change in direction, right? That's one of the arguments I made to some of the liberals who are trying to convince me to vote for Harris. I'm like, look, Kamala Harris could be running against a potato. She is the current vice president. And based on that alone, I would not vote for her. I do not like the direction the country's been going for the last 4 years. So I would vote for anyone else. There's no way. And I was already pissed off at the Democrats anyway. But here's what Lee Fong, one of the last remaining investigative reporters, has to say about Susie Wiles here. And he says, in election aftermath, Hollywood smashes records for, wait. That's the wrong article. That's the Taibbi one. See, I am not together right now. Let's start over. Susie Wiles' lobby firm helped China's ZTE escape sanctions. So what Lee Fong is doing here is being a good reporter and pointing out that, hey, Trump's entire messaging has been, I'm going to be like, aggressively, tariff with China. I'm going to aggressively fight with China about, not even aggressively fight with, but his entire thrust has been, we need to return manufacturing to America. We need to be less outsourced and that kind of thing. So he says the new White House chief of staff, a former registered agent for Nigerian clients, has extensive ties to groups at odds with the MAGA agenda. So if you're into the MAGA agenda, this is probably even more important for you to listen to. A political consultant with a long history of providing corporate interests and foreign agents with government favors is set to become the most powerful figure in the White House. In his first major personnel decision since Tuesday's election victory, Donald Trump announced yesterday that Susie Wiles will serve as his chief of staff. Wiles is a powerful operator who has spent a career in Republican establishment politics, from stints with Representative Jack Kemp to the Bush Quayle campaign and Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential bid. More recently, along with Chris LaCivita, she was behind the scenes manager of Trump's successful campaign, making her appointment an expected choice. So, yet it is her work beyond the campaign trail that may bring pause to supporters, hoping the president-elect will deliver on his America First promises. This is because Wiles is the co-chair of Mercury Public Affairs, one of the largest lobbying firms in the U.S. The company counts many clients which are at odds with various aspects of the Trump agenda. Over the last year, its roster has included Kraft, Heinz, and Nestle, makers of ultra-processed junk foods that will be at odds with the promised Make America Healthy Again reforms of public health agencies. So that might be part of the reason there's a lot of rumors they're not going to let RFK in, but hopefully Trump has the balls to put the kibosh on that if that's the case. According to forms filed with Congress, Wiles is directly registered as a lobbyist for tobacco firm Swisher International on matters related to FDA regulations. Very interesting. Tobacco lobby is going to be very anti-marijuana decriminalization. The client list includes AT&T, Airbnb, eBay, Archer Daniels, Midland, and many other corporate giants. However, it may be her company's extensive foreign lobbying that will raise the most eyebrows. Mercury currently represents the state of Qatar, Libya's national oil company, and 3 major Chinese corporations, Jinko Solar, Hikvision USA, and Alibaba. The Chinese firms have contended with American tariffs and other restrictions. Hikvision, in particular, has faced enhanced sanctions from the Biden administration over allegations that the company's surveillance cameras are used for human rights abuses and military purposes. Mercury lobbyists' ethics filings have worked this year on Hikvision to contact the State Department and the Treasury Department, presumably on lifting restrictions. There are thousands of lobbyists in Washington, but a firm with direct line to the president and a history of shaping foreign policy in exchange for cash on China is far from the norm. Consider the case of ZTE, a major Chinese telecommunication company viewed as a national security threat due to concerns that it provides Chinese intelligence agencies with backdoor access to vital communication networks across the globe. In April 2018, the first Trump administration moved to decisively curb ZTE's growth by banning the state-backed company from purchasing American-made equipment. It was the opening salvo in what was expected to be a global confrontation with the Chinese telecom industry. In response, ZTE hired Mercury on a $75,000 per month retainer to unwind the decision. One of the primary lobbyists of the campaign was Brian Lanza, a former Trump 2016 campaign staffer who works as a partner at the firm. Records show that he promptly began contacting the White House and sanctions officials on behalf of ZTE. Lanza and Eric Branstad, the son of Trump's ambassador to China, Terry Branstad, also traveled to China in the following month. The meeting would not have been known had Chinese officials not publicized the gathering. The China Development Research Foundation, a group tied to the Chinese Communist Party's United Work Department, which works to spread China's political influence abroad, published pictures of Lanza's June 2018 delegation. So there's the photo for you. And in a move that shocked observers, Trump tweeted in May of that year, that he was rethinking the restrictions and would negotiate a deal to back down. President Xi of China and I are working together to give massive Chinese phone company ZTE a way to get back into business fast, he wrote. Too many jobs in China lost. In July 2018, the Commerce Department reversed course and lifted the ban on ZTE. For some Trump insiders, the elevation of Wiles, who has previously lobbied on behalf of other foreign interests, including a Nigerian political party, feels like deja vu. John Kelly, a former Marine Corps general, was an establishment figure who also spun through the revolving door and served on the boards of several defense contractors. He later turned on Trump, accusing him of being a fascist who would govern as a dictator. There's going to be 6 to 12 months, and Trump's going to figure out he's being scammed again by his own chief of staff. A former Trump campaign staffer who asked not to be named told me. And then he's going to try to correct. And by then, it's too late. So right out the gate, that's something to look at closely. And I will say this, Trump is the kind of guy who takes care of his people. She helped him win the election. So he's going to give her a good position in the administration. She led him to a victory. So he's, she deserves it. I could see that. So watch this space, I guess, keep an eye on this. Chief of staff is a very powerful position. If you remember, Obama's first chief of staff was Rahm Emanuel. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff to consider when you think about that type of stuff, So another thing I wanted to kind of highlight here is so I want to show you this. There's a lot of talk about how Dana White kind of helped shape Trump's victory this election. And this guy on TikTok, Beauty Mark, in relation to Rahm Emanuel, did kind of a deep dive into UFC. And I don't know if you know this or not, but UFC's parent company now is owned by Ari Emanuel, Rahm Emanuel's brother. So now you have Dana White, obviously a very close Trump ally, who another big factor in helping him win this cycle. And he is part of, a company that is owned by the brother of Rahm Emanuel. So this guy pulled up some really interesting stuff, and I want to share with you. Let me start this over.
One question that Theo Von. Everybody see how that podcast with Joe Rogan and Theo Von went? There was one question that Theo Von asked, and that's actually one of the reasons of why I did a deep dive into who owns the UFC and who TKO really is. Because let's keep in mind, right? TKO Group Holdings, a subsidiary of Endeavor Group Holdings, right, owns the UFC. Endeavor is a holding company that represents media agencies and talent, including the NFL and NHL. And Ari Emanuel is the CEO and executive chair of TKO Group Holdings. Now, let's keep in mind, right? Emanuel became CEO and director of TKO on September 12th of 20.
If you don't know who Ari Emanuel is, the show Entourage is based on his life. Mark Wahlberg plays, or not Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg produced that. Jeremy Piven plays a young
23 and was appointed executive chair in February 2024. I'm sure we all remember a special little podcast with Joe Rogan earlier this year where he did want to talk about a specific topic. I just want you to check this out for a second. This is a little bit of background information. Do keep in mind, this is public available information, by the way, about Ari Emanuel, specifically his father, right? Jerusalem-born Benjamin Emanuel. He was a pediatrician who was active in the Irgun and Mandatory Palestine. Now, this is also public available information, but I did a much deeper dive on X, specifically on an individual named Patrick Whitesell. On April 27, 2009, right, William Morris Agency, WMA, and the Endeavor Talent Agency announced that they were forming William Morris Endeavor, or WME. Now, Endeavor executives Ari Emanuel, like I just mentioned, and Patrick Whitesell, like I also just mentioned, were widely seen as the architects of the merger and quickly became the co-CEOs of WME. Now, we're not going to do a video on Patrick on TikTok, right, because like I said, I did a deeper dive on X instead. But I just want everybody to concentrate on this real quick. The Irgun was a what paramilitary organization that operated and where between 1931 and 1948. And the Irgun has been viewed as a what organization or organization which carried out what? Also public available information. The Irgun policy was based on what was then called revisionist what? Founded by who? Very interesting man right there. But two of the most infamous operations for which the Irgun were known, right, was this one right here and this one right here. Wow, how about that, huh? Or how about this, right? Also public available information. In particular, the Irgun was described as a what organization by the United Nations, British, and United States governments. That's in media such as the New York Times newspaper, by the way. So I cannot be issued a violation from TikTok. But check this out, right? Albert Einstein himself, in a letter to the New York Times in 1948, compared Irgun to what? I'll let you read that one for yourself real quick.
Interesting.
And then do me a favor and read this one real quick, okay? Also public available information. Well, would you look at that? Now, I'm going to stop there on TikTok because, once again, I don't want to be issued a violation and get my account banned. But if you really want to dig deep into it, you can go check out that other video like I mentioned.
So there you have it. The thing that gives me a little bit of hope on this is that, like I showed you with that Sneeko clip, the MAGA movement is a lot more diverse than it gets credit for. There are pro-Palestinian people in the MAGA movement. There are people like Jackson Hinkle and Sneeko. But the real power brokers are the Emanuel types of the world. And, Dana White, I can't say anything about Dana White's motives. He seems like a great dude. But him and his brother have long been movers and shakers behind the scenes. So this is something to keep an eye on, that and the Susie Wiles thing, as we move into a Trump administration. So I want to move on and talk about some post-election Joe Rogan conversations that were had. The first one being with your boy Dave Smith, and let's just jump into it. Dave Smith, obviously one of my favorite political commentators on the scene right now. I highlight a lot of his stuff, and he had a lot of interesting stuff to say here.
Spent the entire time she was discussing Trump the other day, comparing him to Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, talking about a right-wing authoritarian regime, as if he had never been president for 4 years and didn't behave like any of those things. As if the economy wasn't booming, as if people weren't making more money, as if we weren't involved in any new conflicts overseas, no new wars.
And I mean, I could point to a lot of things Trump did in his 4 years that I think were bad, but they were things that were similar to Obama and Bush, and you know what I mean? It wasn't different.
He could point to them too. You know, when I talked to him about what it was like to actually govern for the first time ever, it's a daunting task. He was telling me about the thousands and thousands of appointments he had to make, thousands of people he had to pick. He didn't know who any of these people were. He had to trust people that he knew, and he didn't know who was telling him the truth and who was just trying to get the system moving along in the exact same direction. And he got bogged down with a lot of that shit. It took forever for them to weed it out. Which is the crazy thing about being president. It's the hardest job on the planet, and you start it without any knowledge of it.
Well, and I mean, a little bit of that's on him, because there were some people who he probably should have known. What I didn't like in his answer about that to you is that then he kind of pivoted to talking about how John Bolton was actually really good to have there because
he was
he's terrifying and he's crazy. Oh, this guy wants war with everyone. But the problem is that, like, that's not how it went down. John Bolton ruined the North Korea deal. It's not like it was successful and the North Koreans were so scared of John Bolton that they wanted to talk to Donald Trump. They were at the meeting. They were willing to talk to Donald Trump. And then John Bolton came in and they were like, these guys are psychopaths. I don't want to make a deal with them.
That
and
mustache alone.
And I will say, look, man, I was rooting for Trump last night as much as anybody in this country
Not
was.
as much as Tony Hinchcliffe.
Okay, second most, second to Tony Hinchcliffe.
Tony Hinchcliffe. More Puerto Ricans voted for Trump than ever by up 26%. He was
well, but wasn't it? Wasn't that just one of the? There's obviously a huge series of these things where the Democrat establishment and the corporate media, but I repeat myself, it's death by 1,000 self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah.
But it is almost as if it's like their whole thing relies on lies.
Right.
It's just all lies. And they have their eyes shut and their fingers in their ears. And they're going, no. Nope. We're just pretending reality is the thing we want it to be.
That was the rationale behind this.
Joy, 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 joy.
To run on vibes. They couldn't run on accomplishment vibes and scaring people about Trump.
Debate.
Exactly.
They don't want to get slowed down by this force that is objective reality. And so all of it, whether it's Joe Biden's sharp as attack, Kamala Harris's joy, Donald Trump is Hitler. Tony Hinchcliffe was a man at an event who made some comments.
So they also, I just want to show this real quick. They also lied about the abortion thing. Okay. And this is such a great kind of like breakdown of how bad these people project. Check this out.
Should recognize gay marriage. No. Okay.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman. I have not supported same-sex marriage. I've supported civil partnerships and contractual relationships. I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law. So you're saying your opinion on
That was when she started gearing up to run for
gay
president.
marriage changed? Or you changed your mind.
I have to say, I think you are being very persistent, but you are playing with my words and playing with what is such an
I'm just trying to
important
clarify
issue.
so I can understand.
No, I don't think you are trying to clarify. I think you're trying to say that, I used to be opposed.
Do you support gay marriage? No, Barack Obama nor I support redefining from a civil side what constitutes marriage. We do not support that.
The president used his radio address yesterday and tomorrow in the Rose Garden to talk about a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage.
Think about this. The world's going to Hades in a handbasket. We are desperately concerned about the circumstance relating to avian flu. We don't have enough vaccines. We don't have enough police officers. And we're going to debate the next 3 weeks.
We don't have enough vaccines.
I'm told.
This was from way back in when they were running for when he was about to run with Barack Obama, and he's already talking about vaccines back then.
Gay marriage, a flag amendment, and God only knows what else. I can't believe the American people can't see through this. We already have a law, the Defense of Marriage Act, where we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between
Notice Biden's stutter.
a man and a woman, and states must respect that. Nobody's violated that law. There's been no challenge to that law. Why do we need a constitutional amendment? Marriage is between a man and a woman. What's the game going on here?
Do you support gay marriage? No, Barack Obama nor I support redefining.
So anyway, you get the idea. The Democrats played with that issue for a long time.
Like it wasn't really. That wasn't a comedian who was
Telling
ribbing
jokes.
everybody.
Not only that, but an insult comedian. A
Right.
comedian who's famous
Right.
for insulting people.
And we're supposed to act like this, it's not 2024. Like we didn't all grow up on Don Rickles, and we all know exactly what Tony Hinchcliffe is doing.
Did you see the clip that the mothership posted? It's on my
No.
Instagram. So they're talking about the comedian who made
I'm
jokes
gonna
about
jump
Puerto
up
Rico.
here.
Why does never really get you? They're scary. Like ghosts, they never steal you.
Yeah, it's true.
Puerto Rico because they don't have any room. So their landfills are just overflowing with garbage. They literally have a giant garbage problem. So he came up with a joke based around that. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
I was texting with him after it, and
So there was actually some legitimacy to Tony's joke. But that's always how it works. Like people are trying to defend it. It was inartful. It wasn't the wisest joke to make in the build up to an election. Let's be honest about that. But by the same token, the point I made previously is that is not going to change anyone's mind. And the idea that, you should be, if Trump is accountable for Tony Hinchcliffe, then, Kamala is accountable for Cardi B, drugging and robbing men or whatever. It's like it's a jump that they tried to make.
And I thought it was so great. I mean, I thought even the bit that he did on Israel Palestine was so funny. He ripped both sides, and then he did. By the way, same with the Puerto Rico thing. There was an underlying really good point to it, which is always like the best comedy when you're just being funny, but at the same time you're like, ow. And he did kind of nail that too, where he was just like, why are we funding wars that have been going on forever? Like, figure it out, guys. Yeah. And then he just got a great rip on Muslims, a great rip on Jews. And so the way they picked out Puerto Ricans
he's going
too.
on in the morning. There's no opening act. No one knows there's going to be comedy.
Yeah, the most difficult setup.
And there's no one on before him other than a prayer. They do a prayer. They were singing prayers and songs. And then the music stops and Tony goes on flat to a bunch of people in the middle of the day.
A video that she put out on Twitter. I didn't know what it was going to be. She just sent me it and I just click on it and play it. And it was just about like what her family went through with their kids, like illnesses and stuff. And it's like this, and it's the most touching video ever. And I'm literally sit down. It's so powerful that I sit down and I'm just watching this whole thing. And I started crying watching it. I got kids with health issues really cuts close to the bone for me. But as I'm sitting there, just like literally sobbing, watching this video, so emotional. And then literally it just dawns on me in the middle of it that I'm supposed to meet my comedian friend in 1 minute in the lobby to go to this show. And I'm just sitting here like, what am I doing? I'm sitting in my hotel room crying about these kids. But anyway, the point of it is that like Hey, look, I don't know enough about this stuff. You know, I know about stuff that I know about. I don't know enough about this. I really should educate myself more on it. But if your argument is that like that Bobby and Nicole are blaming the wrong culprits, you know, it's not the vaccines and it's not the Wi-Fi and it's not like, okay, I don't know. But like, what is it then? And why are you not interested in this? Right. Why are they the only ones who are talking about this? You're telling me we lead the world in chronic illness, and that's not something that comes up in any presidential election ever, other than when Bobby Kennedy runs for president?
And this is why I think that, you know, the rumors that Trump is going to kick Bobby out, Robert F. Kennedy out, Jr. are kind of unfounded, because I think there's too many people that came on board because of this. And he's not going to be able to do it without some kind of an accountability. But we'll see.
That's insane. That medicine they injected into your body, you got vaccine injured.
Yeah.
You don't want to say that, though, because you still want some sort of a job in corporate media, so you have to toe the line. You should be very concerned that this novel before never mass injected into people. Who knows how many different people are going to have different results from some medication, some terrible fucking weird way their biology interacts with this medication.
It's crazy. So they're talking about obviously but it's crazy how this is acceptable conversation now when it wasn't, you know, like a year ago.
Medication's going to cause a horrible side effect. And now you're on ivermectin to treat that.
But they're talking about
I
jumped in a little bit late, but they're talking about Chris Cuomo here from CNN.
The way he tried to spin it, that
it's for long
he
COVID.
wasn't, but he tried to say, because I mean, he really should have just thrown in the white towel. He would have done much better for himself
Saying
in that
I was
debate.
wrong.
If you go, listen, I was at CNN. And I kind of just took for granted that they have the best experts. And so I trusted their experts. And now I realize they were. If he had said that, that would have been very hard. I still would have been harsh on him, but it would have been a different conversation and a different dynamic. What he did was he refused to admit that. And then, and this is really what got me, is that then he started kind of like attacking my motives. Like he was like, oh yeah, no, he goes, I know that, you know, this is probably good for your podcast numbers and stuff, but like as if I don't really believe what I'm saying.
Well, because
I'm just doing this to make money.
And also, that is not good for your podcast numbers. If you remember, that would have got you pulled off the goddamn platform. It's not good for your podcast numbers. And this right here, what he's touching on, just to go back to our little piece on Sam Cedar earlier, this is why Sam Cedar is losing his audience. Because these people can't just admit they were wrong about something, right? They have to pretend like it's the voters' fault, that everyone's just a racist or a misogynist. We didn't do anything wrong. No accountability.
They function. Right. That's why they're accusing you of functioning that way. They're accusing you of doing things just because you know they're going to be outrageous and get a lot of views.
Which is, but you know, like, you know me, I don't do that.
I don't do that.
They're not accusing him of that, Joe. They're accusing him of that because that's what they do. You're right about that. And that's the way that they think. So they're like, why would you tell the truth about something unless there was some benefit? You know, that's why Chris Cuomo is accusing Dave of doing what he does for clicks, because that's how his brain works. That's what he does. He says things that they tell him to say for money. And he can't even fathom how someone else wouldn't do that.
No, I know you don't. I know you don't. In the world, and I don't do anything based on how many views I think it's going to get. That's a fact.
Yeah. And you don't like, there is nothing I say that I don't believe. I might be wrong about some stuff, but everything I say, I believe. I'm not like ever saying anything because just like, oh, this will, you know.
That right there is the new reality. And that's why people like Kyle and Crystal and Sam Cedar and David Pakman and the Young Turks are losing their audience, because you can, and why people like Jimmy and Do Dissidents are thriving, because they're honest. They might, you know, I might not agree with everything Russ and Keaton say all the time, but I know that they're going to give me, you know, their true take on something. And I know that they're going to be honest if new evidence arises that might, you know, discredit their take a little bit. They're going to change their mind based on the new evidence. And that's all you can ask for. And that's what all the people in the new media ecosystem do. The successful ones anyway. You look at like Jimmy and, you know, anyway, let's listen to a little more of this.
So like bring in bigger numbers or something like that.
They think that way. That's why he's accusing you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
because like that's a motivation for people that are in that industry. If you're in the fucking industry of being a mouthpiece for network news, like there's a very narrow window of behavior that you have to operate under. You have to stay inside these lines, and whatever, if you're on Fox or if you're on CBC, NBC or whatever it is, MSNBC, anyone, you have a narrative. They have a narrative in the office. There's a culture. There's 100%. A way people think about that, and this is your job. So you're going to do the things that you think are going to get you more ratings. You're going to
not only that, but another reason these people are so upset about the Trump thing is it's powerful. When you're the person that controls the narrative, when you're the people or when you set the parameters of the debate, that's powerful. And when you lose that power, you're going to be pretty upset about it, as we can see.
To get people more outraged. That's how you're thinking. It's the wrong way to think when you're on the internet.
And they also have there's a real incentive to never consider, like what I said about them being in the baby murder business, because that's that's pretty rough to think of yourself as that. And I remember this one time I watched a documentary on abortion, and it was like a very pro-choice.
How much free time do you have?
Let's jump out of
this was.
The charges were dropped just days after the woman's arrest. Okay, this is to the wire, or you can get prosecuted. Like 7 weeks, you're in jail.
So they're talking about the abortion
and they go, "Oh, so are you running on the track record of the last 4 years?" Like, no. I'm also not going to run on that. Was a drug addict and ended up.
So here's
diversity points, and he also wanted someone to not out.
Here's them talking about Kamala.
He was an assistant coach,
and that's why. Well, look, I'm not saying they did, but I just mean it was much more typical.
Yeah.
To get married at 19 and be married for 60 years or whatever. It's much easier to have rules about abortion in that society.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're in like a hookup culture world where most people are not, people are getting married at like 35 if they get married at all, and they're spending from like 17 to 35 being with many different partners
using apps.
You're just going to come in.
Here's the thing. I disagree with like this whole moral thing about like, women shouldn't be sexually promiscuous. Fuck off. Guys can be sexually promiscuous. We just don't have the same degree of consequences that a woman does. We can't ever be strapped with like having to carry a baby to term. So I think that, if you listen to the way that JD and Trump have been talking, it sounds like they're in the business of maybe doing more to encourage people to have families, like making the cost of living better, making it easier to afford to have a child, because the abortion rate isn't high because women just love to kill babies. I don't even know if it's high to begin with. I'm sure it's probably not that high to begin with, but the people who get abortions, largely it's because they can't afford to take care of a child. What are they going to do? It's not about, this whole, and the people that get so cutesy about killing babies don't care about other forms of life. They get cutesy and emotional about, baby. But, an innocent guy who was accused of a crime just got executed. Whatever, Not consistent.
Just write a law on top of that. It's just a very difficult situation. But, to your initial point, it's like the Dems were running on that because that was really the only political winner that they had. That was the only issue that people actually really cared about, and they were on the Democrat side about it. And that's why they had to run on that. That's why Kamala Harris, which was one of the craziest things of this whole campaign, one of the most amazing things, is that they actually tried to just run on nothing.
One of my favorites was that Tim Walz tried to claim that his wife got pregnant through in vitro fertilization, and she said that's not true. So he lied about that.
What a weird guy he was.
His wife had to come out and say he was lying.
Yeah. Well, so something, okay.
That guy lied about everything. He lied about being a head coach. He was an assistant coach. He lied about his military rank. Lied about whether or not he served in a war. Lied about whether or not he was in Tiananmen.
And listen, it's not like Trump tells the truth about everything, but also your accusations that he's such a liar kind of fall flat when you're just as bad or worse.
Square.
Yeah.
He fucking lies about everything.
Well, see, what happened is, right? So Obama, who was obviously a very, very smart guy and you know, an incredibly talented politician. At least while he was running for president, he was. I think he's lost a step, but so Obama still was a bit of a narcissist.
He's lost a step because none of the shit, just like this, I guess the running theme here is once you have been proven a fraud, people should not trust you anymore. David Pakman, Obama.
And he wanted to pick Joe Biden as his VP. He didn't want someone who was going to outshine him. And so he picked Joe Biden, who, you know, even before he went senile, was never particularly bright. So he picked Joe Biden as his VP. And then Joe Biden, well, he wanted some diversity points, and he also wanted someone to not outshine him because now he was becoming senile and he was never that bright to begin with. So he picks Kamala Harris to be his VP. And then Kamala Harris needs to pick someone who won't outshine her. You know what I mean? So it's like the idiocracy just like spun out of control.
So you know what that is? Steve Jobs had this whole thing about hiring, and he calls it like A players, B players, C players. So he's like, I only hire A players because A players are people who are intelligent and well socialized, but who won't be threatened by other people who are more intelligent than them. They'll work together well. They're not petty and egotistical. But what happens is a lot of times you'll get B players in the mix, or an A player will hire a B player just because they want someone that's not going to be, like he's saying, not outshine them. And pretty soon the B players will only hire people under them. And then you get this company that's larded up with just people who are trying to protect their position in the company instead of, you know, hiring people that are going to be good for the forward trajectory of the company. So that's kind of what the Democratic Party has become. It's just an organization larded with B and C players.
Real quick, where all of a sudden you get to like the third VP in a row and you're like, yo, really? This is who you picked? Like,
he's a knucklehead.
You know what's crazy is that this was in many ways, this was this presidential election was
the contrast.
So wild.
The contrast between Walz and Vance is interesting too, because Vance is better than Trump. Like, and that says a lot about Trump's decision making. Is it's like he chose someone that's like more articulate than him, thinner, fitter than him, younger, smarter, and you know, that's like he's picking like an heir to the MAGA throne, so to speak. Whereas, I mean, why did Kamala? It's clearly, you know, the Democrats are listening to campaign people and, you know, stats people. And they're like, well, we need to get the white guy vote, so you got to pick an old white guy, you know. Let's see if there's anything else that's good to listen to in this.
CNN. You just can't tell. You can't tell me that you sitting down with Elon Musk for 3 hours and then compare that to like Wolf Blitzer with all his graphics behind him, talking for 30 seconds before he goes to a pharmaceutical commercial, and then coming back and having the dumbest left winger yell at the dumbest right winger. Really? And you guys are going to act like you're the grown-ups in the room? Like it's too ridiculous. Yep. And that's right. So the entire young generation they've all turned that off. None of them are getting their news from CNN anymore. No. And look, man, that's, I think, the most beautiful part of this election.
Yes.
Yeah, mainstream media is dead.
Yeah, that
was a wrap, son. And certainly not comparable anymore. And if you look at the numbers, like what are the numbers that CNN has for a regular show compared to like the numbers of the Trump podcast?
I don't think they have a show that regularly cracks.
Forget the numbers. Let's take a quick sidebar here. And look at this. I'm cracking up before I even showed you this. Look at this. This is so fantastic. Google AI with the median viewing age for MSNBC right here. Look at this. The median age of an MSNBC viewer is 70 years old. This is older than the median age of viewers for other cable news networks, including Fox News and CNN. And they're only a couple years younger. And then you look at this, the median age of viewers for other cable channels, Bravo and TNT skew a little bit younger. But all this, even MTV, it's like 51 years old. Because those are the only people that remember what MTV actually was. But anyway, it is a very beautiful thing that era is over. I'm very happy about that. That was my biggest, as I said before, that was my biggest takeaway from this election is that corporate media, no one cares. You can call people Nazi, you can cancel whoever you want. We're not listening to you assholes anymore.
Million views.
The Instagram,
I think their biggest one is still under 1 million.
The Twitter, the X video that I posted when I posted Elon on the podcast, between me and him, it got 65 million views in a day.
It's unbelievable. Dude.
In a day.
Yeah.
And that's not counting YouTube, which is like another, I don't know how many million he got on YouTube. That's not counting Spotify.
Yeah.
We don't even know those numbers yet because it was just 2 days ago.
Right.
65 between his account and my account, 65 million views.
And there was
the X is the #1 news source on Earth.
Yeah.
On Earth. It's the most trusted because it's the only one that's not fucked with.
Yep.
So even if
And I will say, I think the community notes thing is the absolute best way to kind of handle fact checking of anything, because it's crowdsourced fact checking. So you have a variety of different people making this, so it's not just 1 or 2 people, which is what these guys used to be able to do, is say like, oh, well, Washington Post and CNN said this, so that's the truth. And anyone who says anything else is lying. No, not anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore. So let's jump over to a couple of the takes from the other interview Rogan did with Theo Von post-election. And, I think Theo Von's Trump interview was another piece of the puzzle that kind of helped him win. So let's listen.
Mugged, right?
Really?
Yeah. He's going to buy a couple of
So he meets the guy to go get the walkie-talkie. He works translation.
What is that?
Exactly. That's what Wayne Brady is.
He's pansexual?
He came out.
Damn.
Came out as pansexual. I don't know what that means.
I can barely handle whatever I am, dude. To be real honest, bro.
It's also new.
Whatever I am, bro, it keeps jerking off at night and being afraid to talk to women. So whatever that one is, that's what I am, bro.
I think I'm getting a little bit of a cold.
You're theosexual.
Oh, it's fucking getting kind of heady, man.
You're theosexual. Why are you afraid to talk to the women?
No, I don't know.
You shouldn't be.
No, like as a human, he's been a buddy.
Okay, so this is what I wanted. This is one of the things I wanted to get.
Kamala's never going to win those states.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's them talking about the election. Forgive me for jumping around a bit, but this is actually good.
So
which is interesting that you got into stand-up comedy, which makes people really fucking nervous.
Well, I think I was familiar with being nervous, so that didn't affect me.
Oh, interesting. Because you're nervous all the time. You're like, fuck it, I'll just go be nervous in front of all these people.
Oh, the audience is when you're on stage, the audience is just a woman.
Oh, like you're just trying to get them to like you.
You're just trying to you're like, how do we get this to work out?
How do I get you to like me more? Who do I have to be?
Dude, the other night was crazy. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I got nothing, man.
No, the other night was crazy.
This week's been crazy. It's just been a crazy week.
So this is kind of the part that I wanted to highlight. They kind of talk about, and okay, let me just start over here. I will say, just continuing on this theme of the winners of the election being the new media ecosystem. I think the Tony Hinchcliffe, Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Comedy Circle, Legion of Skanks, even if you want to throw them in there, they helped decide this election. And I went into the weeds on the numbers behind Kill Tony recently, but all the offshoots of that universe, Shane Gillis and Matt McCusker and Adam Ray and Theo and and Cam Patterson and Hans Kim. There are so many. Tony is so massive, and he has so many tentacles. And it's really Rogan. Like Tony's almost one of Rogan's tentacles, to be honest. But that's and Dana White, and these guys wield so much influence now. Obviously, way more than the legacy press. So this is them talking about the election results coming in, and just candidly with all these people that I just mentioned. So
yeah,
it's been a crazy week, man.
It was interesting because the beginning of the night, no one knew what was going to happen. So you're watching the first results roll in, and there's like this weird thing, and then Trump gets way ahead, but you're like, you don't want to get too hopeful. Like, how far ahead he's ahead by 100 points. That seems like a lot.
Yeah,
and you're like, what is it?
remember the 2020 election? Like, didn't he actually win the 2020 election, and then all these other votes came in, and it changed? I mean, they didn't declare him the winner, but he was like up, and then all of a sudden a bunch of new votes came in, and it changed. That's how I remember it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Correct me if I'm
And
wrong.
some channels are like, and then every channel's kind of different.
Yeah. They had different numbers. I was getting a different number off my Apple News update than I was getting off of CNN. And then I was texting people like Tulsi and JD Vance. I was getting a different up. Apparently, Elon created an app and he knew who won 4 hours before the results. So as the results were coming in, 4 hours before they called it, Dana White told me Elon was like, I'm leaving. It's over. Donald won. He just fucking somehow or another.
Given the access to AI and tech people that Elon has, I don't doubt that story is untrue. And it made me wonder, like, what are the technical parameters of that? Is he getting like a feed of election results directly from the states or something and piping it into some kind of AI thing?
I'm going to go back into my pod and evaporate.
I don't know what he's getting, where he's pulling his data from, but he had like the most accurate data in terms of the rural states hadn't put the results in yet, but yet Trump was ahead in these states. Kamala's never going to win those states. So tabulated that and like put it all together. I don't know how he did it. But
yeah.
Dana, I haven't even talked to Elon about this. I don't know, like the Dana translation.
I just had this brilliant thought, and I want to take a sidebar on it for a second. What just happened to the news media, I'm going to refer to it as the Napsterization of the news media, because I've noticed this pattern, and it started with music, which is, of course, my first love. But when it comes to music, in the early 2000s, Napster kind of wiped out the record industry. Not really, but like it obliterated the gates. Let's put it that way, right? And the Napsterization of the music industry resulted in this kind of new dynamic where a hit can come from any direction. And you have a guy like Gautier or Lil Nas X or whatever recording hits in their bedrooms now. And so this is kind of the same dynamic that happened then to the movie industry. Fuck, I just smacked my gut. Getting a little excited. So this is the same dynamic that happened to the movie industry, right? That the Netflixization, I'll stick with Napsterization because they were first, but then Netflix took over the movie. Now you have the same dynamic happening in the news media. And I think it's kind of been creeping towards this for a long time, with the way that publishing was revolutionized in the new digital, smartphone landscape. But that was the end. Like Joe said, that's a wrap, son. The corporate media has officially been Napsterized, to coin a term.
But Dana said he had an app and he was like showing him. He's like, it's over. And he fucking left. Dude just left.
It's over. John Jones won. Just saying that.
He just fucking left.
Dude, yeah, I mean, the whole thing's crazy to me. I'm so happy for my biggest thing was I was so happy for Bobby Kennedy, man.
Yeah.
Because he's the only person that I super know, like as a human, He's been a buddy of mine for years, and I've just known that he's I trust him. Like it's almost like you have people that and that are good people. It's like,
yeah,
I have to trust my own instincts at some point and know I know him.
Right.
He's somebody I would vouch for.
Right.
He's a good guy, and he's been helpful to me, like in moments where I have struggled as a person, and just been inspirational to me. It's like I know him, like a friend. And so that's, I think, like that was something I was like super excited about, just to see where everybody was like, screw this guy, and to see him have a arc where it's like, because all he ever cared about, to me, and I don't know, this is just my opinions, dude. Some people, everybody has their own opinions, and I'm
so this guy is being very honest about RFK Jr., as his personal experience with RFK Jr., and he has to preface that with like, this is just my opinion, so people don't attack and smear him. That's what has been done to RFK Jr. by the Democratic machine, and they'll do it to anyone. I keep saying this. Another reason this victory is so great for me is because they did this shit to Bernie Sanders, and I guarantee you, if Bernie Sanders had gotten as far along the chain as Trump got, as close to the Stanley Cup or whatever you want to call it, the White House, as Trump got, they would have unloaded all this shit on him too. And Trump's just the kind of guy who can slog through it and eventually win. He's been fighting in court for years, but I mean, they'll do it to anyone. They'll do it to RFK. And Theo's kind of like spilling his guts here about his personal experience with RFK. And I think it's cool.
I'm an idiot, but he always cared about like the rivers and the environment, and then he started to care about the environment inside of our bodies, right? So for me, that all makes sense, right? And so, like,
we know where it all happened from, right?
I was super excited about.
Do you know how he made the transition to being worried about pharmaceutical drugs? He would give these speeches, and he litigated a bunch of lawsuits against corporations that were polluting rivers. They cleaned up the East River. Like, he was an environmental attorney, and they were also talking about the effects of mercury poisoning in the soil and water. And these women kept coming to these things that he was doing and saying.
So RFK Jr. is like a Aaron Brockovich type figure. That's who he is at his core. That's who he's been. And look at what the Democrats turned him into, because he was a threat to, Joe Biden's power, or, the current establishment.
Saying you need to investigate mercury in vaccines. And, he thought like that is like, which most people think. You hear vaccine, like the last thing I want to be labeled is a vaccine skeptic. Jesus Christ, a vaccine denier. That's like, we talked about this yesterday, but it's like Holocaust denier is number one, but vaccine denier and election denier are like right under it. Yeah. And he started looking into it, particularly the MMR vaccines and the correlation between the uptick of all these autoimmune issues, autism spectrum disorders, all these different things that coincided directly with the increase in the vaccine schedule for kids. And so then he starts doing research on it. And the more he does research on it, the more it gets uncovered that there's this gigantic machine that's protecting all of this, because there's so much money that's being generated. And most of it has to do with, during the Reagan administration, they gave them immunity to prosecution. So they were no longer liable for whatever side effects the vaccines caused.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and then of course,
one of the things too that Rogan talked about with JD Vance in their interview is how, and this is such a lefty thing to talk about, is how the risks and the losses of these companies are public, but the profits are all private. So they're able to mitigate their losses. The taxpayers pay for their losses, but they get to keep all the profits. And most of them pay almost zero in taxes. They just pay for a lot of lobbying.
These motherfuckers started giving little babies that were just born Hep B vaccines. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's you get that from needles and sex.
Yeah,
this is
unless it's Pam Anderson's baby, dude. I wouldn't put anything in that kid, And no, I don't even know if she has any kids or not. And I love Tommy Lee, so I don't know.
Well, you fucked up.
She does have kids.
Done, dude. It's a joke. What are you gonna do? It's a fucking joke.
Yeah, sorry, everything's okay.
I feel the same way about Bobby. I don't know him as well as I know Tulsi, though. Tulsi is.
Yeah, I don't know her.
Tulsi's a good friend of mine. I love her. She's great. She's an awesome person. She's like a legitimate awesome person. That lady, she served as a congresswoman for 8 years. And the whole time she was against this divide of right versus left. She was always trying to be cool with everybody.
The other thing you got to remember about Joe Rogan, a lot of people don't think about this. His home life is like him and all women. He has 3 daughters and a wife. He doesn't have any sons. So he and Tulsi, I just can imagine Tulsi being an inspiration to his family, even, as a female politician.
Everybody, she served overseas. She was deployed overseas in a medical unit, man. So she was helping people that got blown up by the war twice. That's where she got that crazy white streak in her hair. That all came from the stress of being overseas, working in a medical unit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. Can stress be that compartmentalized inside of you and it comes out like that?
Oh, your body's, you can't imagine. I was just talking to my friend Bruce about this last night. He was a cop in Austin. We were talking about the amount of death that most police officers see and the stress that has on you. And what he was telling me is,
So I'm going to stop there, but they tell some pretty crazy stories. I just wanted to highlight how, they were part of that path to victory for the most recent election and the stuff that Theo said about RFK Jr. And again, I think that because of that, it's going to be really tough for Trump to just kick him to the curb, And so I want to end today with just a little glimmer of hope. And this is obviously something that, kind of, I guess it's hard to explain. It's something that Trump filmed way before the election that I think some people are kind of looking at now in retrospect and going, oh, he said this? Because when I saw it, I went, oh, wow, I'd never seen it before, but apparently it's something that Trump said a while ago. And this is how I'm going to end. I'm going to end the show with a kind of discussion about this clip. But I think for me, if I had voted, it's one of the reasons I would have voted the way I did. I don't even think the Green Party would have been great on this, but this is Trump talking about the censorship industrial complex, which is a issue that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts. And this is the main reason I think that his winning the most recent election is a net positive, even for people who don't think that it is. So listen to this.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that. If this most fundamental right is allowed to perish, then the rest of our rights and liberties will topple, just like dominoes, one by one. They'll go down. That's why today I'm announcing my plan to shatter the left-wing censorship regime and to reclaim the right to free speech for all Americans. And reclaim is a very important word in this case because they've taken it away. In recent weeks, bombshell reports have confirmed that a sinister group of deep state bureaucrats, Silicon Valley tyrants, left-wing activists, and depraved corporate news media have been conspiring to manipulate and silence the American people. They have collaborated to suppress vital information on everything from elections to public health. The censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. And here's my plan. First, within hours of my inauguration, I will sign an executive order banning any federal department or agency from colluding with any organization, business, or person to censor, limit, categorize, or impede the lawful speech of American citizens. I will then ban federal money from being used to label domestic speech as mis or disinformation. And I will begin.
I think the thing that I like the most about this is he's giving specifics. He's not just saying like, I'm going to reclaim free speech. He's like giving you specific things he's going to do. And we're about to find out how legit this is.
In the process of identifying and firing every federal bureaucrat who has engaged in domestic censorship, directly or indirectly, whether they are the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health, Human Services, the FBI, the DOJ, no matter who they are. Second, I will order the Department of Justice to investigate all parties involved in the new online censorship regime, which is absolutely destructive and terrible, and to aggressively prosecute any and all crimes identified. These include...
And the fact that that Trump aligned himself to with people like Tony Hinchcliffe and Joe Rogan, I think also lends credence to this as well, because those people are going to be at his ear, like it or not. I mean, I think that's such a positive that Joe Rogan and people like Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe, who are genuinely good people, whether you want to believe that or not, you can very, very much tell, have direct lines to the new administration.
Possible violations of federal civil rights law, campaign finance laws, federal election law, securities law, and antitrust laws, the Hatch Act, and a host of other potential criminal, civil, regulatory, and constitutional offenses. To assist in these efforts, I am urging House Republicans to immediately send preservation letters, and we have to do this right now, to the Biden administration, the Biden campaign, and every Silicon Valley tech giant, ordering them not to destroy evidence of censorship. Third, upon my inauguration as president, I will ask Congress to send a bill to my desk revising Section 230 to get big online platforms out of censorship business. From now on, digital platforms should only qualify for immunity protection under Section 230 if they meet high standards of neutrality, transparency, fairness, and non-discrimination.
I love it.
We should require these platforms to increase their efforts to take down unlawful content such as child exploitation
That's fine.
and promoting terrorism, while dramatically curtailing their power to arbitrarily restrict lawful speech. Fourth, we need to break up the entire toxic censorship industry that has arisen under the false guise of tackling so-called mis- and disinformation. The federal government should immediately stop funding all nonprofits and academic programs that support this authoritarian project.
Academic programs right there is so key. I mean, this proves that he knows what he's talking about, because if you listen to Taibbi talk, a lot of the groups that are doing this censorship are like at Stanford, like the NED, or these weird like cutouts. So this is amazing to me that he knows all this stuff, where he's been briefed on all this and he understands.
If any
it like
U.S.
that.
university is discovered to have engaged in censorship activities or election interferences in the past, such as flagging social media content.
So the one thing that you have to be careful about here is it's pretty clear who the power groups that have infiltrated Trump's administration are. And hopefully this applies to anti-Semitism, quote unquote, as well, right? You see what I'm getting at?
For removal of blacklisting, those universities should lose federal research dollars and federal student loan support for a period of 5 years and maybe more. We should also enact new laws laying out clear criminal penalties for federal bureaucrats who partner with private entities to do an end run around the Constitution and deprive Americans of their First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights. In other words, deprive them of their vote. And once you lose those elections, and once you lose your borders like we have, you no longer have a country. Furthermore, to confront the problems of major platforms being infiltrated by legions of former deep staters and intelligence officials, there should be a 7-year cooling off period before any employee of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DNI, DHS, or DOD is allowed to take a job at a company possessing vast quantities of U.S. user data. Fifth, the time has finally come for Congress to pass a digital Bill of Rights. This should include a right to digital due process. In other words, government officials should need a court order to take down online content, not send information requests such as the FBI was sending to Twitter. Furthermore, when users of big online platforms have their content or accounts removed, throttled, shadow banned, or otherwise restricted, no matter what name they use, they should have the right to be informed that it's happening, the right to a specific explanation of the reason why, and the right to a timely appeal. In addition, all users...
So I'm going to stop right there, but you get the idea. And you can tell right from that why the younger crowd voted largely for Trump, because he's speaking their language on this kind of thing. So that about wraps it up for me today. Thank you for tuning in. If you did, I appreciate you, and like and subscribe, all that good shit. You know, I'm gonna eventually make kind of like a little like break clip that has that like and subscribe and all that shit, so I don't have to say it. But you know, I don't say it enough. So if you tuning in and you like the content, please hit that, smash that like button. God, I feel corny saying that. Thank you, though. I do appreciate every viewer I have. My subscription base has grown quite steadily over the last year. and a half. And I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Please jump in the comments and, share some info with me or tell me where I'm wrong on stuff. And I'm going to take you out today, as I like to do, with one of my brilliantly creative. I shouldn't say that. I'm kind of sarcastically stroking myself here. But I like to put together these little music videos. So I'm going to take you out today with this one. Because I think it's just very apropos considering the results of this most recent election. This is Voters Are a Threat to Democracy, featuring Mika Brzezinski of MSNBC. Thank you all for tuning in again. The future is looking pretty bright as far as I'm concerned. And let's keep talking. And I'll see you all next time. Enjoy.
White rural voters, a threat to democracy at this point. Voters, a threat to democracy. 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 White rural voters. White rural voters. White rural voters. The threat to American democracy. Voters, a threat to 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 democracy. White rural voters. White rural voters. White rural voters. White rural voters. Why are white rural voters a threat to democracy at this point? Voters, a threat to democracy. 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 White rural voters. White rural voters. White rural voters. The threat to American democracy.